This is the second day of the April 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. Two questions have come up several times in meetings. One of them is, what is the nature of questioning, of the questioning that you talk about here? And the other one, brought up by quite a number of people, is, what did you mean when you said yesterday that feelings are unexpressed thoughts? First, we will look at the nature of questioning. Get to the feelings later. The way we've been conditioned, all of us, in the course of our life, at home, in school, kindergarten, high school, elementary school, college, in the political life and religious organizations. Asking questions has meant expecting answers. The quicker, the better. Questions imply answers. That if a question is asked, there must be an answer to it. And somebody knows that answer. Or we can learn the answers to all the questions that are put to us. At home, little children start asking their parents very quickly, what is this? What is this? Why that? And there may be this natural curiosity in children to want to find out, but there's also one has found that the parents will give some attention to one if one asks a question. So a question sets up a pressure to get an answer or to give an answer, doesn't it? We've also been trained to think of ourselves as good or important or smart, intelligent, if we do have the answers, or of someone else to be smart and good or important if he or she has the answers to questions. So there goes prestige for me in knowing answers and producing them with people who ask questions, maybe in a conversation or in a discussion. There's very little or no emphasis, maybe in studying philosophy or some scientific research where there may be questions asked without knowing the answers or realizing that some of them may not be able to be answered. But on the whole, we've been brought up to give answers, to expect answers. Has been the emphasis. To be in the know. And rarely, ever, to be occupied with the question. Allowing the question itself to unfold, to be looked at, or to look, not to be looked at, looking with a questioning mind. There's two things, right? To look at the question, what is meant by the question? To explore it, where it comes from. Not to jump through the pressure that the question exerts to an answer, to an explanation, or to a dictionary, or to somebody who is always willing to give answers, explanations. Be in the know. To give space to a question. Wondering about the question. What is it all about? Where does it come from? Is it really clear? And if it is a genuine question, well, we'll go into it in a moment. Then looking or listening with a questioning mind. Somebody mentioned in a meeting, questions are gentle. This kind of questioning is gentle. One gets a feel for that. Not demanding or forcing the other or oneself, but allowing unfoldment in a gentle way. Someone brought up in a meeting a sickness. One has been diagnosed to have a certain sickness, illness. Can the question come up, what is this state that has just been diagnosed? The diagnosis is one thing. There's knowledge in it and past experience and maybe prognosis, expectation for the future, how long it will last, whether it will be lasting a long time, or there will be remission, or it will be terminal. But what is the state that the diagnosis is referring to? Or what is the impact of the diagnosis on the state that one finds oneself, in which one went to the doctor in the first place? This is a gentle question, which cannot be answered instantly. One has to look, listen, feel, touch, inwardly. To see if there is a connection between having just been diagnosed and the impact on the whole system, on thought, feeling, emotion, sensation. And then, aside from the diagnosis and its impact, which is observable, can be watched, seen for oneself, what is the state right now as it is felt? Can it be done without the word, without the diagnosis? One can examine that impact, but one can also look at how it feels, because the impact has already happened. Maybe the feeling now is affected by what someone said about one's state, by the label that was put on it. I don't know if that can be undone, whether one can look freshly without the label. I think one can, it's possible, but one has to find out for oneself. That's questioning, wondering, and in the light and gentleness of wondering, observing. And one may find that one can only observe carefully, freshly, directly, if there's no knowledge about what one is observing already in the mind, if there's no knowledge. Knowledge may be in the mind, but if it does not impact the observation. In the meeting room, there's an amazing flower. There's another one out here, and the flower has a name. And if one knows the name and has seen a flower like that before, that may be enough. This is a flower, says the brain. I know it, I've seen it before, last retreat or a few retreats ago. And there's no impulse to look at it because there is knowledge of this flower, its name, and the remembrance of having seen it before. But there can also be the question, what is this apart from the name, the remembrance, the knowledge? Let me look. What is it? What is it is sort of the state of mind. It can, if the brain picks it up and says, what is it, what is it, what is it, it can become a mantra, which is often used for calming the mind, controlling or stilling thought, tranquilizing the brain. It can happen with repeating a mantra. But this kind of what is it is an opening question, wondering and looking. Question, and its verbiage and repetition is not important. What is important is that it open up the curiosity to look. Sometimes people say, I get rather bored sitting. No questions come up. It's getting a little quieter, but there's nothing that is really coming up as a question. And please, I'm not implying with talking about questioning today that there should be questioning. We're not talking about shoulds here. It's up to each one what he or she wishes to do or not do, or what comes up. But we're talking about questioning. Not in terms of a preferred practice or something, if one does it, one becomes good or on the spiritual path or whatever. This is all off the mark. So, in sitting and noticing boredom, why does one notice boredom? How does one come to say, I'm bored? The words come into the mind, do they? Due to certain signals from the body. Maybe the absence of excitement, absence of a feeling of stimulation. feeling what one calls to oneself a state of low energy. All of this can, instead of just making statements to oneself about it, I'm this, I'm that, I'm bored, I have no energy. All of this can be easily turned into, what am I talking about to myself? And what's the impact of these words on this body-mind? Because the way we talk to ourselves about ourselves mentally, quietly, quiet internal monologues, affects the body and mind. It doesn't go unorchestrated. The body, organs, muscles, glands respond to the way we describe ourselves to ourselves. I'm using this dualistic language right now because this is how we talk about ourselves. We'll examine this at a later time, the accuracy of it. But it is observable that the way the brain puts out information, or headlines, I've sometimes called it, headlines about ourselves, affects the body and mind. Headlines or punchlines. Some statement about ourselves that says, oh, it punched us right in the solar plexus. I'm no good. I'm a failure. Boom. But here we were talking about boredom. And that seems to be such a, at first sight, such an impossible thing to get a hold of. But it is not, if one wonders what this boredom is. And refraining at that moment from calling it boredom, having observed the habitual responses to a word like that on the body and mind. What's going on? And not press for an answer, like we were pressed for in school or at home, or have pressed others. Just to allow the question to operate on its own, with some mild to intense curiosity about this state. I'm giving this range because sometimes I've talked about intense curiosity and people say, I don't have intense curiosity. That's okay. There may be a mild curiosity. There may be no curiosity. Then one keeps saying, I'm bored. And yet, having talked about it, there may be kindled a mild curiosity about the effect of saying I'm bored and what this state really is. This state of feeling unexcited or tired, fatigued, sleepy, drowsy. You could say, well, wait a minute. Drowsiness and sleepiness means that there is no interest or no question or no energy to look. No, it doesn't mean that at all. One may think that it means that. Just because there's drowsiness or tiredness or low energy does not mean that there cannot be awareness of that and wondering what that is. Not the awareness, but the drowsiness, the fatigue. And because the question has come up, there can be a listening. What is it? And listen inwardly, quietly, subtly, tiredly, if you will, to tiredness. Maybe one will find that this tiredness takes a turn. It turns into some energy now to find out, because a state of separation which ensues inevitably If one says, I am tired, I am no good at this, I am a failure, the state of separation, separating an I out from having that state, is draining energy. Whereas the question, what is this? And listening without demanding an answer, or without judging, right or wrong, good or bad, is not separating. It is entering into what is there, not as a separate part, but looking at it while being that. Entering into it from the inside, as it were. Through listening, looking, feeling, touching. Without knowing. Knowledge coming up to discern that, the effect of it. It's a separation, it's a standing back as the knower. Explanations may come up, words may come up. There's nothing right or wrong about this. To see it all, the whole process. And how much we long to be in the know, and how uncomfortable it may be, at least at the beginning, to not know and enter into this state of boredom or fatigue or disease without knowing. Not knowing what it is, which is true. The knowledge about it is so abstract, so limited. But the state is there, it's just there. And knowing about it abstractly is not the only way to be in touch with it. Well, it's a way of not being in touch with it. It's a way of standing apart from it as the thinker and the knower. So what is this other way of no separation? Feeling it out, or listening without any predetermined conclusions or demands. Just a simple, what is it? And then, an opening to what is there. One may find that not knowing something, entering into something not knowing, may give a sense of anxiety. Why? If that is what is happening, people report that as fear, anxiety. Is it that thought has already said, you don't know about this? You ought to know about it. Or some verbal or non-verbal memory that it's dangerous not to know. The the word unknown can arouse fear in human beings. The word. Maybe coupled with some image of a black hole. People often talk about the black hole and the fear of entering into the black hole. That's imagery, isn't it? Symbolism, word. And the impact on the body of image and symbol. And yet, if the mind is quietly exploring, listening and looking now to what is actually happening, actually perceivable now, there's nothing fearful about that. It's only the thought that this is something fearful which arouses symptoms of anxiety in the body. And thoughts, symbols, memories, images come and go so fast with such speed that they may not have been perceived. What is perceivable now is a state of anxiety. In the face of the unknown, something one doesn't know, and therefore concludes the brain it's dangerous to face the unknown. But there are thoughts that are going on that connect with organs and glands and muscles that produce what we call anxiety. That's why it's so important to catch these connections, to see it, perceive it directly, inwardly, so that this whole thing becomes clear rather than mysterious and misunderstood. Misinterpreted. We have a deep conviction that we have deep feelings, gut feelings, which come spontaneously on their own to give us a warning. And we're questioning that, whether any gut feelings or anxiety feelings, feelings of fear or any kind of emotion, whatever, arises spontaneously, whether there isn't always some thought or image or memory that triggers it. But the connection isn't seen, but can be seen with the coming of awareness, of a awareness which isn't just off and on so quickly, but has some stability to it. These things reveal themselves. Connection between thought and image and emotion. And with that, we're coming now to the second question that was asked. What did you mean yesterday when you said that feelings are unexpressed thoughts? Is that what I said? I don't remember what I said. If that's what I said, I never said that before. And it's hard right now. I can't remember the context, the whole context out of which this came. We don't have to reconstruct it. We can start freshly. And just giving a moment to this statement that feelings or emotions are unexpressed thoughts. Was the meaning of that? Was that trying to express that the thought that sets the feeling into motion is not perceived, it's hidden, concealed, but the emotion is there and expresses that thought. But we don't want to make something complicated. We'll look at what feelings are. It comes up so much. This wondering whether one is really getting in touch with one's feelings, or whether in fact this work of meditative inquiry or other kind of meditations obscure feelings or deny feelings. Which often happens. Feelings are very uncomfortable. Then one can use a meditative practice to shove them so they don't need to be felt. But we were asking, what do we mean by feelings? Is that interesting to other people? To you, other people? To us? It's interesting to me. What do we mean? What do we refer to when we speak about feelings? Having feelings. I have such and such feelings. Feelings of anger. Feelings of fear or sadness. Despair or depression. What is being referred to? Because the way I just put it, I have feelings of anger or sadness is already questionable. We can question, which we're doing here, whether there is indeed a separate I, a me, a self, an ego, a separate entity which has feelings of anger or sadness or fear. We talk that way. It's our most habitual and learned way of expressing things. And as we were pointing out earlier today, the way we express things and put things has an impact on this body and mind. But whether there is indeed a separate entity needs to be questioned and found out. One cannot assume, just because one talks in those terms and everybody else does too, that this is really so. So what are feelings of anger, feelings of fear? We mentioned just a little while ago the glands and organs and muscles, the whole breathing system suddenly responding in a certain way. Which from past experience, from knowledge, one labels as fear, as sadness, as anger. That comes in, doesn't it? One recognizes this state of being. When the heart pounds, and intestines hurt, maybe an urge to go to the bathroom, stomach is queasy, muscles get tense. I'm afraid, one says. I feel afraid, I feel fear. But is that all there is to feeling? The physical symptoms, the physical manifestation? Maybe a choking feeling in the throat, pressure on the chest, like a welling up of tears. One calls, I'm sad, I feel sad. Very often, when this comes up, one says, I don't know why I feel sad. I don't know why I feel afraid. Or I don't know why I feel angry. It just suddenly seems to arise. But I would venture to say that if one looks more carefully and develops a curiosity for what is really happening in us, in all manner of states, no matter what, boredom or fear, anxiety, anger, to watch what is going on, wondering and observing. Something keeps that feeling of fear or sadness or anger going, doesn't it? If there wasn't something to keep it going, it would come and go and be done with. Like in little children. Outbursts of emotion are usually very short-lived. Happen and then they're gone. But in adults or older children, these feelings often keep going. And what is it that keeps them going? What fuels them? What nourishes them? Can one wonder and begin to watch and listen? Listen again to this internal monologue or dialogue with someone else imagined. What you did to me, what you have done to me, time and time again. I don't deserve this, or it is outright betrayal. Whatever words the mind uses, and the body constantly responding with anger, or with what one calls angry feelings, fueled by what we say to ourselves about a situation, about what happened, or about what happened in the past or shouldn't have happened. One can experiment with this and bring up a recent situation where immense anger was felt. And say those things that triggered the anger, and one will feel the anger is there. If there isn't a great deal of attention and awareness, the words can set in motion the anger or the fear or the sadness. Words, by that I mean thoughts, images, memories. It's all the same process. So feeling is inseparably intertwined with the process of thinking, remembering, and imaging, isn't it? I'm not saying this to convince us. We have to see these things for ourselves. If we don't, we just run on automatic all the time and have false interpretation of what is happening. If we didn't tell ourselves that we are a failure, that we are no good, we wouldn't get depressive feelings of failure. And what we say to ourselves now, what we are or are not, hooks in with what other people have told us in the past, and that sort of resonates either in what we're saying ourselves, and what the brain is putting out right now, or one also hears other voices, parental or teacher voices, putting me down. And with this verbalization, recalled verbalization, and imagery, remembrance, go the feelings. They're intertwined. One can't exist without the other. So it seems. If there's no attention, they are inseparably intertwined. The triggering remembrances, words, and the feelings and emotions. if there is a growing awareness of this, then maybe in playing with this experimentally, it's possible to recall the incident, what somebody did, and even say what she or he did to me. It's outrageous, the nerve of it. And maybe no reaction, because there's attention. Something wants to come up, the trigger is set, but it takes a certain amount of time. There's a gap between the thought and the response of the organism. And when there's awareness, attention, listening in that gap, the response may not come to full fruition. It's not being suppressed, it's just seen. And in the seeing there is an amazing intelligence operating that sees and doesn't need to go on with habit, sees the habit and the pattern at a glance. Because if it examines this whole process of anger, there are other thoughts running beside how outrageous this was, the nerve of him or her to do this to me. There's also the thought running, I should not be angry. It's bad to be angry. If this is a thought, it just creates conflict with the urge to feel angry. And depending on which of the two trains has more weight, one suppresses the other. Either the thought you should control anger suppresses the rage, or I must express my anger suppresses the thought I shouldn't be angry. And we're not saying one should be angry or shouldn't be angry. Anger is a very destructive movement among us human beings, tremendously destructive of others and of ourselves. But to be done with anger cannot come out of learned commands, learned repressive precepts. I must not be angry. I resolve to control my anger. We used to have a precept like that in another training center. I will never do it. For one thing, the resolve not to become angry prevents the clear seeing of anger. Any thought prevents the directness of seeing. And anger can only dissolve in the presence of intelligent seeing. And then the fact that it is destructive is a fact. It's not just a thought or a fear. It is so. It can be seen, and therefore, why do something that's destructive? It's in that there's no decision. Seeing is the clarity about it. And in that seeing, there's no feeling right or wrong or good or bad about it. It doesn't trigger the emotions. It sheds light on them, but it doesn't trigger them. So can there be observation of how thought and emotion, thought and feeling, feeling and thought are all intermingled? Causing each other endlessly, augmenting each other. A thought causing fear, fearful symptoms, and the fearful symptoms causing fearful thoughts about being afraid. And fearful thoughts about being afraid cause more symptoms. And then the deep felt conviction, there must be something to be afraid of. There must be something dangerous around here because I feel so afraid. And the marvel of examining all of that, examining the thoughts that cause the fear or caused the anger, whether they're true, they're accurate. Usually, if there is strong emotion in process, strong anger, strong fear, the pressure of that doesn't even allow examining the words and the accuracy of the words that cause it. One can be so angry at somebody, so screaming mad at somebody, that there's no examination of whether the thoughts that fuel that anger are accurate. Whether he or she really did that, or the accuracy of it. And yet one can sit down later maybe and evoke the whole thing again and begin to examine when the heat of it has subdued, or the freeze of it have subdued a little bit, submerged, or cooled down. And one may find to one's surprise that one doesn't really know whether he or she really meant that, or meant me personally. May have had nothing to do with me, even though I was the target of it. And the fearful thoughts may have nothing to do with the situation right now. They refer to something way back in the past that has repeated itself. But it's not so now, and yet the same fear, as though it was like that now. As to who there is who feels these feelings, or if there is a who, a someone, we'll go into that some other time. But it's a tremendous question to raise. Maybe not so much who is feeling it, because then there's already an implied assumption that there is someone. But just opening up the process so insight is gained into it, and may reveal the process, but no one who suffers that process. That there is someone is part of that process. The thought that there is someone is part of that thought-feeling process. And yet, why does it feel so real that I suffer the pain, the sadness, the grief, the anger, and the fear? The fact that at times there's intensity in talking, does not mean this is exhortation to do something. There's just a lot of energy that expresses itself intensely. But it does not need to be interpreted. She says, I ought to do this or that. It's just in looking together and wondering and questioning together. But this amazing human mind and body. We will end here for today.